All right. So for time's sake, we'll go ahead and get things started at this time. So what we'll do here first and foremost is we're going to go through a brief slideshow presentation, and then we'll actually go into the demonstration of Provar Automation. So me personally, I always find slides to be very boring. So again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. I know the main reason why most of you guys are in the audience today is to see my beautiful face, not really a demonstration. Just kidding. So we'll go ahead and get things started now. So I'm Joe Garza. I'm a senior solution engineer here at Provar. I've worked in quality assurance for a little over 5 years doing manual testing, automation, as well as being a quality assurance manager. So I'm pretty well versed in this space. I also am bilingual. So English is not my first language. Sarcasm is. So I hope you guys all can keep up with me if I do start saying some things that don't really make entirely sense. So our agenda, again, we're going to go through a brief slideshow and then we'll get into our demonstration. But to give you a little bit of background of Provar, we've been in the business for a little over 10 years, or about 10 years, really. So we actually have been built from the ground up, purpose built for Salesforce Test Automation. And we're going to really cover the reason why that's important for you. So ultimately, there's many solutions that can build automation. There's some that are built specifically for Salesforce, and then there's a lot that are really generic. And really, it's hard to understand what is going to be the best option for you and your company and your needs. And really, that's what we're here to discuss and cover for you today. So first and foremost, we're going to kind of cover that challenge of Salesforce Test Automation. So most every other solution using something like Java and Selenium is great. It works perfectly fine. You will not have problems with it. But in Salesforce, there's a lot of things that make just standard automation difficult. The main point that I really like to point out is the dynamic elements. So not only are you dealing with your code changes that you're making and your layout changes, as well as changing the flows of your scripts, but Salesforce is making changes as well. Now, the reason why that becomes complicated is whenever these things change, if the layout changes, if the flow, the required fields change, well, now you have to go back and you have to refactor your automation scripts. And if you have to continuously go through this process of refactoring your scripts, they're kind of useless. They're not of much value. It's more work for you to rebuild these than to just run these tests on your own. So that's where Provar comes in to help alleviate that problem. So these are things that Provar really prides themselves on. So first and foremost, resilient. So that problem that we spoke of right now in regards to automating Salesforce, we make our automated tests a lot more resilient to changes, making it so you don't have to go through that process of continuously reworking your test scripts. It's also very intuitive. So, just about any solution out there, the idea of it being an automated test solution is that it makes the process easier. Again, reusable. So this is going to be something that is going to be a little bit more unique when it comes to Provar's approach to automating. We're going to be going into this a little bit more in depth. And then lastly, end-to-end. So inside of Salesforce, ultimately you have external integrations that you are going to want to test with Salesforce, whether that be an email, an API, or actually performing some automated test steps on that web page. We got you covered there. So first, what we'll talk about is the resilient nature and how Provar accommodates this. So let's first talk about what Provar does to make your test automation more resilient inside of Salesforce. So when it comes to the way that Provar provides the resiliency for your automated tests, it comes down to our approach. So the way that typical automation is performed is it's relying on the DOM structure of that page. It's utilizing page objects. The difficulty with this inside of Salesforce, again, is Salesforce is ever changing. So as soon as something changes, whether it's the label, the type of this element, the name or attribute, the location of it moves, your automation no longer can find that element. It's broke. You need to rework it. Provar is utilizing the metadata inside of Salesforce. So regardless of what Salesforce changes, if any of those attributes of the element change, if it moves from one side of the screen to another, it doesn't matter. The metadata is going to recognize that. Based on what change has been made, the metadata is going to reflect that, and your tests are going to continue to work. So those 3 releases per year that Salesforce does, Provar is going to automatically make updates based on the metadata, and your tests continue to work. The reason why this is important, I'll give you an example. So when the change from Classic to Lightning applied, our clients, they didn't have any issues. Their tests continued to work. Anyone who was relying on that DOM structure, using something like Java and Selenium or just a generic test automation solution, everything broke. They had to refactor everything. So that's really what Provar is going to do. Is going to future-proof you from those things that Salesforce is changing. An analogy I like to use when it comes to testing anything is the automobile industry. So, ultimately, they're going to be testing their cars very thoroughly. They're going to be doing crash tests to make sure that they're safe to drive, and they also want to make sure that their vehicles are very reliable. Because let's be honest, if you or I were to go to the dealership and buy a new car today, and yeah, it drives great, it handles everything great, but I'm having to take it back to the shop continuously because it keeps breaking down. I keep having problems with it. I don't want that car. It's useless to me. This is why it's important to choose the right testing automation solution for you, one that's going to be able to accommodate and future proof you from what Salesforce is changing. Because ultimately, if you're continuously having to rework your tests and spend that much time and effort on that, that solution is going to cost you more money than it's going to save you money. So again, when it comes to traditional automation, your tests are going to keep working until you make a change. Inside of Salesforce, your tests are going to also break when Salesforce makes a change. So if you're relying on that DOM structure, you're going to have to make changes to your test scripts every time that you change something or Salesforce changes something. With Provar, the only thing that you really have to worry about is if you added a new field or if you've added some new custom components that don't have metadata and you have to accommodate your tests for that. So we call this the rework spiral. So essentially what happens when you do build out automated tests is you're going to build up a library of them. While you're going through and building out new features, new development work, our Salesforce is pushing releases, your automated tests are going to break. You then have to go back there, fix them. And of course, you want to still build out some additional ones to keep on building up your library. But eventually, they're going to break again and you keep having to go through this process. So this is the problem that Provar solves. It allows you to build those tests one time and have that metadata future-proof you from what Salesforce is changing. So when it comes to our way of reusing our tests, again, like I mentioned, this is unique to Provar. So since we're utilizing the metadata, we take the amount of work that you have to do to build up your automated testing library down significantly. So in traditional automated solutions, again, you're relying on that DOM structure. So if you have a profile that has a different layout, if things are in a different language and that locator is utilizing that language, whatever it may be, it doesn't work anywhere else but for that one test case. But with Provar, utilizing that metadata, you can create one test case that can work in your different profiles with different layouts. They can be used in different languages. They can be used in different environments, different permission sets, whatever it may be. So that one test case can essentially accommodate a dozen or so different scenarios for you very easily. So this is a big advantage in regards to time to value with Provar compared to any other solution out there, is that you can build one test and that one test can accommodate many different scenarios for you. So when it comes to our approach to automating, again, basically any automation solution out there should make the process easier for you. When our style of automation is very unique to us. I'll be showing this in the demo, but you're actually able to see everything work in live time. And in my opinion, that's one of the biggest advantages that we offer with our style. So I'll be talking about that a little bit more. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. Ultimately, we, like I mentioned, we are built to be able to be used as an end-to-end testing solution. So external emails, interactions with APIs, databases, other applications, whatever it may be, Provar can accommodate full end-to-end testing. This is a quote from Dreamforce 2022 from Salesforce themselves. I'd really like to just hone in on that last sentence. So we went from spending 3 months to doing the same effort in 1 week's time with one human using Provar. So to me, that speaks volumes. They had an entire team that was working on their automated tests, and what they were doing in 3 months' time, now one person is doing in 1 week's time. So that really goes to speak volumes in regards to the amount of rework that has been cut down and the ease to go ahead and utilize Provar to perform their automation. What we'll be doing now is we'll go ahead and jump right into our demonstration. I'm going to show you guys a few things here inside of Provar, and then I'll go ahead and show you how we can use this for building out your test. So the first thing I like to point out is, as you can see, this is a local desktop installation. The way that we get this set up is very simple. You run our installer, you plug in your license key. After that, you connect to Salesforce with your username and password, like so. That's it. You're ready to begin automating. So very simple to get set up. So we do offer other connections. So again, we are meant to be a full end-to-end testing solution. So outside of Salesforce, we do databases, Google, Microsoft would be for emails, generic web service for external API calls, Salesforce, of course. UI testing will be used for any website external to Salesforce. Inside the Salesforce connection, you'll see there are different options on here. So if we do require MFA, we have our OAuth connections to be able to accommodate that. And if we're wanting to do impersonation and just about any other solution out there, what you'd have to do is go in settings, go to users, find the user you want to impersonate, and then log in as them. Takes additional time. And Provar is super simple. You just use this connection here. You specify one of your admin level users and then the username who you want to impersonate in that environment. And you're immediately signed in with them. So it's very simple to use. I'll show you that here a little bit later. Outside of that, in the bottom right-hand corner, this is where the metadata gets stored. So once you do connect into Salesforce, it'll start downloading that metadata and understanding your environment. Once you click into any of those objects, you'll see a SQL query editor opens up down here. So if you need to refer to any records, you can very quickly right here. And you can also use this to perform API calls and SQL queries within your tests by dragging and dropping it in. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and show you how we use Provar to build automation. So I'll click on this button here, Test Builder. That's going to go ahead and set the stage for me. Right now, this connection that I'm using, this is a user that is being impersonated with our use logon as connection. And so what you'll see is I'm going to be immediately signed in with that profile, and we'll be able to go ahead and build out automation on that. What'll happen next is my browser is going to launch. And like mentioned, I'm going to be immediately signed in with this user. There's no additional steps I have to do to go into settings or setup and find that user and sign in as them. I'll be immediately signed in with them. So when it comes to our approach of automation, like I mentioned, it is very unique the way that we handle it. So while I'm actually building out my automation, I know right then and there it's actually going to be working. So that's a big differentiator between how Provar works and anything else out there. In traditional automation and even recording playback solutions, you can build out as much as you want, but you have no idea if anything's actually working until you stop and run it back. And usually what you'll find is there's things that are broken that you have to go back and refactor. So I'll go through the process of creating a new opportunity. To map out this new button, I'll right click on it and I'll say add to test case. Utilizing the metadata, Test Builder knows we are on the opportunity home screen. It knows we're interacting with the new button. And since it's using the metadata, it knows that this is a button, so we should click on this. But we can specify another action here as well. We can also let it know when we want to capture a screenshot. But the nice thing is, in the event of a failure, it does it automatically for you. Now I'm going to say add and do. And what we'll see is this is actually going to go through, it's going to go ahead and interact with that element directly for us. What you'll also see is the page is going to refresh, and then it's going to click on the button. So the reason for that refresh is if you notice, I didn't actually map out a step to click on opportunities. So another thing that the metadata does outside of just making your tests a lot more resilient to change is, again, it understands Salesforce very well. It knows where this new button exists on the opportunity home screen, so it performed the navigation to go there. And I'll show you my favorite feature of automating with Provar. So I came from using Java and Selenium. I always hated debugging scenarios, but with Provar, we make it very easy to do. So we have the ability to just step to any of the steps within our test. So I'm going to step back here on this step, and I can play it back directly from here. And what we'll see is this will automatically navigate into opportunities and then click on that new button for us. But the reason why this is really nice for refactoring and debugging your scenarios is I've worked on automated test scripts that take an hour to run, and they're failing at the very end. And so usually what that process would look like when I was using code or record and playback solutions is I'd make a change to my test, I'd play it back, wait an hour, and then it fails, and I keep going through that until I get the right fix in place. In Provar, in that same scenario, I would just step to that step, make sure I'm on the right screen, make my change, play it back. If it didn't work, step back to it and run it again. So it's a huge time saver in having to refactor your tests versus any other solution out there. Now, with the opportunity form presented, there's a couple ways I can do this. I can pre-populate all the fields like I'm doing right now. And then when I go in here and I say add to test case, the value will automatically get transferred into Test Builder for me. Now, if I'd like, I can make this a little bit more dynamic by use of our built-in functions. So one that I like using for text fields is a unique ID. This will generate a randomized value based on off of however many characters you specify, in this case 5. So think about duplication rules in Salesforce. Every single time you're running this test, it needs a unique value. A unique ID is a great way of accommodating that. So you can see there's a randomized value there now. Same thing here at the close date. I wouldn't want to use a static value here because we can see this is only good for one more day. Using a static value, it's just going to make more maintenance for me down the road. So by use of a date add function, I could do something like today, comma 30, and this will provide a date 30 days in the future every single time this test runs. So now I don't have to worry about any stale data. Provar is going to make that very simple for me. Now at this stage in the account name, I'm just going to leave these as is. And again, as you can see, it is making all these selections in live time. In Test Builder, you're seeing these green dots next to each step. That's just letting us know that the step is working. This account name, this is the first field that is unique to Salesforce. It's a Salesforce lookup field. So traditional automation, this would be a 3-step process. I'd have to create a step to type in, a step to wait for the options to populate, and then a step to choose the correct option. But as you'll see here, with us being purpose-built on Salesforce, we have a lot of built-in shortcuts for things like this. So using the metadata, we really understand the Salesforce platform. This is going to be a 1-step. I'll say add and do. It's going to type that value in. So then I'm going to wait for the options to populate, and then it's going to make the selection for us. So we make things very easy by use of the metadata. It understands Salesforce very well. It can perform navigation. It understands how these fields work and the specific wait times for all of them. So in traditional automation, anytime a page loads, you should be telling it that you want it to wait. Otherwise, it's going to try and move forward to the next step and interact with something that hasn't displayed on the screen yet, and your test will fail. We have all the built-in waits on all of our elements. You don't even have to worry about doing that. So it's a big time saver in regards to building out your automation from what you normally would have to do. Another thing that's nice as well is with our assertions, we're able to assert the value, but we're also able to assert attributes of these elements. This is useful in profile and permission-based testing. So we can assert if something is visible or it's enabled. So like I mentioned earlier, our tests are designed to be fully reusable. One of the things I mentioned is that they are usable in different profiles. So if I wanted to use the same test in another profile, maybe it had a different permission set with it, and maybe something is visible for profile A, but not for profile B, or it's enabled for this profile, but not for the other. Well, I can assert this, and by use of conditional logic, I can just tell this test, if we're running this with profile A, let's make sure this is visible. But if we're running this with profile B, let's make sure this is not visible. So this makes it very easy to do our profile and permission-based testing. But in this case, I just want to assert that the stage is prospecting here. What I'll be doing next is I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the other ways that Provar is also going to speed up your automation and make it even easier than what we've seen already. So automating the UI is great. Generally speaking, that's where you're going to want to perform a lot of your testing, but there are other ways that you can do it as well. So by use of API calls, Provar can speed up your automated tests significantly. And it's actually even easier, which to me is surprising because I've worked in quality assurance in the past, and I can tell you that when I first started, API calls, they were daunting. It was seen as something that is a little bit more difficult to do. So what I'll show you here is how we can interact with multiple profiles in the same test as well. So that's another thing that is a benefit of Provar. You can drag and drop as many of these connections within one test as you want. So I'll add this additional user, I'll resume this, and then what you'll see is a new browser will open up for that additional user. So I built out scenarios where I'm interacting with 4 different profiles within one test and going back and forth between them. We make this super easy. Just add the other connection and then map out your additional steps on that browser. Very simple. But now we'll move into the API call. So the reason I added this user is this is an admin level user who does have access to the APIs. So I'm going to do an apples to apples comparison. You saw me create the opportunity via on-screen steps. That was quick. But let me show you with the API call. It's even easier and faster. So I'll drag and drop this opportunity in. I'm going to say create. By default, my required fields are going to be selected for me. So I don't have to add anything extra. I'll just go ahead and say OK. So now from here, I'll be presented with the form. I can still use my built-in functions. So if I wanted to use a unique ID for the name, I can. I can simply cherry pick the stage like so. And the close date, I'm just going to simply cherry pick that as well. I'll save this, and coming back over here, I'll resume that. And just like that, I created an opportunity. That was seconds. So now with that being created, I can actually navigate directly into that record. So if I look in my log, I can see it. I can navigate directly into that record. But the point that I want to get across is it's already easy to build automation with our on-screen steps. It's even easier and quicker with the API calls. And I'll tell you why this is important to use. So think about scenarios where you're going through and you're having to interact with multiple different records. This is a long test case. Maybe you're having to create a bunch of records, or maybe you're just having to set up a lot of data to set the stage for this test case. Well, if you're doing all of that via on-screen steps, it is going to take a little bit longer. But what's nice about Provar is you can integrate on-screen steps with your API calls. So you can quickly create your records that you need with your API calls and be able to then interact with them with your on-screen steps to perform those validations. So I can tell you from personal experience, I've built out proof of concepts for my clients in the past where they had test cases that took an hour to run manually. I'm not joking about that. I ran this test manually and it took an hour, and they told me the same. That same test case, by use of API calls, I was able to reduce that execution down to just 15 minutes. This is one of their primary use cases. This is one of their major regression tests that they run on a regular basis. So think about this from a software development lifecycle perspective. Every time that they're pushing code, they're having to run this test, and it takes them an hour. Plus, they have to run everything else to also make sure that everything is good. So if you're having to spend that much time on your test, just to be able to make sure that things are good to go forward, you're not going to know very quickly if your new deployment is in good, stable condition or not. But by use of these API calls, the way that Provar makes it, and being able to execute that test significantly faster, there's a ton of value in that. You're able to find out that much sooner if there is a problem, and you're able to address it sooner. When we look at the cost of bugs, if they're found early in the software development lifecycle versus later, it's significantly cheaper to fix it early versus later. If you find it as soon as it's released, I believe it's about 10 times cheaper than it is if it is found in production. And really the reason being is because it's a lot easier to isolate the change that caused that to break early versus when there's a lot more features that have been released within this code change. So really we can see how easy it is to build automation with Provar. It's very intuitive. We're able to navigate throughout the screen while we are performing the automation. So you're able to do it as if you were manually testing this. We also make it very easy in regards to the maintenance effort that you would have to perform by use of the metadata. So again, with our metadata-driven automation approach, those 3 releases per year that Salesforce is doing, the metadata is going to refresh. Your automation is going to continue to work. So that's a lot of weight that is lifted off of your shoulders of your team that you normally would have to do to refactor to ensure your automation is working. At this point, this is really what I wanted to go ahead and demonstrate in regards to Provar Automation. We do have our other solutions, Grid and Provar Manager, that we'll be having webinars down the line with as well. But at this point, I'd like to go ahead and open up to any questions that there are so far at this time. So we do have our Q&A open. So if you guys do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and throw those in there. I will say one of the things that I do normally get asked about as well is modularity. We have the ability to reuse the test cases that we create. And the answer is yes to that. So Provar has an option to make our test cases callable. And basically what that does is that would make a test case a function or a method. You can reuse this in your other tests. So in the same example here, where I went through the process of creating a new opportunity, maybe I have 10 other test cases that also need a new opportunity created. Rather than remapping all these steps, let's just make this callable and then use this in my 10 other tests. Benefit of that as well is maybe I make my opportunity have more required fields or something changes in that. Well, rather than refactoring all 10 of those that are using that opportunity, I just have to refactor that one callable test, and all 10 of tests will get that update. So another question as well, data parameterization. So very easy to do in Provar. We do have the ability to do so with our templates. So you can go ahead and import CSV, Excel, or JSON formatted file to go ahead and data drive your test. And the way that you do that is there's a little icon right here. You just click on that and then refer over to that file, and this will go ahead and import those values for you. And the reason why you'd want to use this kind of functionality is, again, reusability. So you can create a test case and you can, by data driving it, you can basically have one test case that runs a multitude of different scenarios for you. I'll give you an example, CPQ. So a lot of times what I see with my clients that are using CPQ is they want to test their different products, the rules with them, the pricing with them. Well, by simply data driving your test, you really just need one test case set up that's using different data. So this way it can use the different products, the different rules in those products. It's based on the data that it's passing through and perform the necessary validations. Can you report on the steps taken to create a test script for a client to use? So I'm not sure what that question is asking specifically. So we do offer reporting. So there is reporting in Provar Manager that will be able to give you a little bit more information in regards to your quality analytics. But if you're asking for the time to build or what it took to build that, there's not anything like that. Can we export steps, expected results? This would be helpful for writing end user UAT. Yes, so you can. We do have the ability to do that. So anytime that you are performing an assertion that will capture value, you can export that. But ultimately, anytime you run a test, you can go ahead and generate the report and be able to get everything off of that. Within the report, that will have the data comparisons, the actual value versus what you were expecting. So it will have all that data contained within it. All right. Well, I think if there's no other questions, I think we can get things wrapped up at this time. So, like Amber did mention as well, if you guys want to go ahead and schedule a demo of Provar Automation, she did put a link in the chat to go ahead and set up a demonstration. And then she also put in the registration link for our next webinars that are coming up for some of our newer solutions that have come out. Am I able to run tests on a remote server like Sauce Labs or Azure DevOps? Yes. So we do have the ability to integrate Provar into any release management, any pipeline solution. We also do have our grid solution that we'll be discussing here in one of our next webinars. But the way that we do that is via an ANT file. Does Provar provide security reassurance when dealing with client NPI? So since Provar is installed locally, we don't have access to any of your data. So we have clients that are in large financial institutions, government entities. And really, that's one of the biggest things that is an advantage of having a locally installed platform like Provar is our security is bar none. So we are ISO 27001 certified. So that is definitely one of the biggest benefits of having an on-prem solution is security is top notch. We don't have access to any of your data. All right. Well, I believe we are at time and looks like all of our questions are answered. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Thank you.